to his house in 1927. It's the last time the two of them talked. I don't know if I got to that part, and they talked, and the encounter is really incredible. Gandhi said, I know we have some differences, but I hope you don't mind my experiments with truth. And Savarkar looked at him and said, your experiments with truth are endangering the nation. And that was the last time they talked, 1927. So that would be what? 21 years before Savarkar finally got him. Wow. Anyway.
That's usually why people get killed.
What?
That's usually why people get killed. If somebody sees them as a threat.
Right.
The only way to get rid of threats is to kill them.
Right. Okay. So the point there is, I'm just repeating it for the microphone, is that often that's why people get killed. They're seen as a threat. So
James.
What?
James, you want and do not have, so you...
Okay, so in the book of James, you want and you do not have, so you kill. That's a great example. And the other part I was thinking in the book of James was, the righteous one offers you no resistance. Right? That's in the book of James as well. So when you look at the book of James, you're going to see the pattern. Okay, any other comments about this or problems with the way I formulated it? I mean, remember, I'm really, questions are going to make this more clear. Any question or problems. Or, yes, Peter.
Well, Gandhi sought no power. I mean, isn't power a word that can hardly be defined then? How do you know if nobody's seeking power? I mean, there's no definition for power, is there?
Well, Gandhi was saying, I think that, okay, the question is, there's no definition for power, so how could you say that Gandhi wasn't seeking power? I'd say that Gandhi was framing it in terms of the quest for earthly, temporal power over a country. Gandhi said that if you're going to experiment with truth, the way he was doing it with nonviolence, you should not look for offices or temporal power. That's how I might parse it. I don't know if that's helpful.
You know my acclamation from Chris's perspective of military history. He was a big proponent of proportionality, and how could evil have been overcome with Hitler in World War II with no violence? I mean, they had to be proportional in how they...
Okay, so the argument of some people with power is that you have to have a proportional response to evil, proportionate to the evil, in order to overcome the evil. That's their argument. Okay? That's what you're saying. Okay?
And, how else, only way for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing?
Right. And so what Gandhi might have said is that...
out with a picket sign, and
no,
I don't think it would have done much good.
I don't think it was about a picket sign in America. Gandhi probably would have said that some of the German citizenry at the right time had an opportunity to show some truth force, and they didn't take it.
Right.
Okay? And yeah, I mean, the famous Franz Jagerstratter from Austria did take it, and they beheaded him. Do you remember that story? He's a saint in the Catholic Church now. So, but the issue being, there wasn't enough people practicing soul force to make Gandhi's argument work. That would be the comeback. And so people could give themselves more readily to the lie of war. That's all. That'd be the answer, I think.
Said that it wasn't a just means
What?
of dealing with it. Gandhi said that
Right.
the means wasn't right.
The means wasn't right, according to him.
Yeah, I don't buy it.
You don't buy it. Okay. Well, good. I mean, that's exactly the argument in history. And of course, Savarkar felt the same way, and his disciples who killed Gandhi. They felt, no, wait, that's not going to...
Innocents were being murdered left and right. And,
On both sides.
yeah.
And Gandhi had one way to deal with it, and Savarkar had another. And Savarkar won completely in India.
How old was he when he died?
77. How old was Gandhi when he died? 77. I'm just repeating the...
I just have this thought just came to mind. You know, George Peterson has a solution like, it's not exactly like Gandhi's. It's an interesting one though. He sees good deeds. In fact, he said, you make 500 moral choices a day. And he wants to get people into a spirituality where they're of extreme morality, heroic morality. And in particular, Peterson is into the little people. He believes that what they're doing, it looks like it's nothing, you know, just living their little lives and whatnot. But he said, no, when they do good things, great things can happen. And his goal, the whole goal of his philosophy is to overcome the malevolence which he believes is leading to the nuclear holocaust. It's happening now. People are, but the way he looks at it, it's almost quantitative. It's like if there were 1 billion good deeds today, and then there were 1.5 billion tomorrow, then there'd be less chance of nuclear war. Now, I'm not caricaturing what he says. That's what he says. So the question then is does Gandhi have an angle like that? Like when you read Peterson, at first you say, yeah, right. Tell me about it. You can't stop people that way. Not after a while. He's very convincing. But
Okay, so this is a long discussion. I'm just putting this in for the record. There's a long discussion here by Joe Bajakis on Jordan Peterson, whereby he sees the argument from Jordan Peterson having to do with multiplying good deeds in the direction of the malevolence created by war.
and that's leading to the eventual destruction of the species.
Right, no, he sees the same thing that Gandhi saw. Jordan Peterson definitely sees the same problem, and he's proposing a different means to it. Okay? That's good. I mean, that's helpful. Jordan Peterson is, he's the most, I think, like the most famous public intellectual in the English-speaking world right now. I mean, in terms of YouTube counts, if that's how you want to measure it. But the thing is that he's definitely someone who should be part of this dialogue, no doubt. So Dr. Bajakis has a point here. Any other? This is good. Joe.
I mean, your point's well taken that the German people should have nipped the problem with Hitler in the bud. Obviously, for whatever reason, I know some people tried to, but they weren't able to. What about the people in Europe, Netherlands and France that were overrun, and then the other threats that they posed, to England and ultimately after Pearl Harbor declared war on the United States. What would have Gandhi done? Like Ann mentioned, innocents were being killed. Hitler was not one. I would say that you could negotiate with as a reasonable person. How do you respond to nonviolence in a situation that's in the process of killing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people?
Yeah, but let me just check this out. What was I going to say? I lost the train of thought. Oh yeah, Wilson Miscampbell. What about his arguments? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, so
it's apropos this issue. Well, actually, it's nuclear war, and he argues that he's Australian. He's at Notre Dame. He argues that nuclear war, the bomb had to be dropped because the Japanese were killing 2 million people a year in Indonesia, or in Southeast Asia. It had to be stopped. I'm not Gus knows more about this stuff than I do. But doesn't that come apropos there? Because Gandhi was clear. He would have let Hitler take it over. He had that question posed to him. You know, we're using the rough and violent means, but, you know, what if he did take over? And Gandhi said, no, I won't give up my position. I think that's what Gandhi said.
See, here's the problem. Counterfactuals in history can't always be placed after the fact upon morality. That would be my answer in general to what you're saying, raising the question. But I agree with Fulton Sheen that the American propensity to jump the gun on morality occurred at 8:15 in the morning on August 6th, 1945. That's what he said. In other words, there's something about that choice of preemptively killing all those civilians that was over the line. And not only Fulton Sheen thought that, Dorothy Day thought that, John Ford, the moralist at the time, the Jesuit, who did a lot of work on morality, thought that. There were a number of people, secular people too, who thought that. So I'd say you have to be careful with the counterfactuals arguments.
Well, Dr. Jones brings up that Heisenberg met with Niels Bohr and Bohr's and told him, Germany cannot get the atomic bomb, so there's no need for you guys to get it. But that decision had already been made. They didn't care to hear that. In other words, it seemed like the decision to bomb Hiroshima was already in the American psyche years before.
Okay.
It was not going to be stopped.
Okay.
It was something about the whole nature of who we are that just propelled it.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, there's an argument there that it's just kind of who we are.
All right.
We invented it, we wanted to use it.
Can I offer a possible way to counter that?
Okay.
Which is that's a battle that is temporal, it's here. And it's a reality in the sense that the history can at least be in the argument as a proof that sometimes an evil, violent act on our part, Eisenhower ordering the dropping of the bomb, ended the war, and the violence was over, and it stopped the killing, right? So that would be the historical argument in its behalf. But as you brought up when we discussed it, the internal warfare is perhaps the one that is more important, and that long-term will have the staying power, because the violence has continued, and that sort of flipped the trigger, as you say, to the next generation of potential violence, and that the only true final salvation for man will be something that takes place internally. As Plato, you mentioned, said, you purify the soul, and then sometimes it can go to did you call it the politica?
The polis. The polis.
Polis.
Yeah.
And it can go to that point and become part of our existence as we can advance the peace that we found and help guide someone else to that peace. But an easy argument, no, it's not.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Okay, any other, there's one more question here.
By the way, one more thing you were talking about, Aristotle and the polis and everything. The three activities of the polis, which Gus and I like to talk about a lot. What? Contemplation?
The three activities of the ancient city.
The ancient city, the polis.
This is John Donne. The three activities of the ancient city are work, pleasure, and contemplation.
Yeah, recreation. Pleasure has too much of a carnal thing. But recreation, like this would be recreation.
Okay. Work, recreation, and contemplation.
And the reason there's violence is?
The reason there's violence, according to John Donne, is that the modern and postmodern city does not know how to contemplate.
Right.
And since there's no contemplation, its empty place is filled with violence.
Right.
That's John Donne.
And so
that's what John Donne says.
So at the end of this talk, you're saying, hey, anybody want to do something about peace? Go contemplate. So have a prayer time. Do something like that. Go walk and look at the trees or something like that. Yeah, he meant that, by the way. Donne was saying that there's a contemplative way of living, so to speak, not super mystical.
It's not super mystical.
Right.
It's for every human being.
It will solve the problem of violence, he said.
It's for every human being.
Yeah.
So that's exactly right. John Donne did not think contemplation was for just the skilled people in monasteries. It was for everybody. And Maritain talked about the same thing. He called it contemplation on the roads. Okay? So John was just working out of that same tradition. Contemplation on the roads. Very important idea. You gotta, and Gandhi thought that the whole key was to get with the people on the roads, the poorest of the poor. And that's where he would discover the wisdom that he needed for peace. That was his proposal. Okay? That's a great way to summarize the problem, I think, at this point. Now, next week, I can't wait. Next week, we're going to do John the 23rd, Pope John the 23rd, Saint Pope John the 23rd on Monday, and we're going to do Saint Pope John Paul on Wednesday.
Wow.
So we're going to look at the answer to some of these problems that we've already raised from the point of view of two popes that were saints. How about that?
Sounds.
That's the next stage of the journey of the popes. Yeah.
No, I could certainly see how the contemplation would help an individual, but how, I mean, I've got
How do you make a society contemplate?
Well, I mean, I was going to say, how does that was my follow-up, was how does that affect the society?
Well, the one person that comes to mind in regards to that, and this is not a setup, but St. Babel. Okay? So what happens in St. Babel's journey? He's first of all a nobleman, and then he falls away from truth and from life, and he lives a life of Riley and all that. And he's cruel to his slaves and all that. And then he has a conversion when he hears the gospel. And then, because he's a wealthy man, what does he do in Ghent? He takes a big section of his land, turns it into a monastery, invites other people to pray with him at the monastery, and then he becomes ultimately the abbot of that monastery. And then after that, he's honored by the monks of the monastery by becoming a solitary. In the Benedictine tradition, you could not become a solitary unless you had proven yourself in community living. You weren't allowed to just go off on your own if you had been proven by loving people in the community. He gets to spend the last part of his life in the hollow of a tree. He's a solitary, praying there. And you know what his patronage becomes? He becomes the patron of the city of Ghent. The whole city looks to him. The whole polis looks to St. Babel to carry them through. So that's the answer. It's in the life of the Christian who...
I was thinking of Mother Teresa the whole time you were talking.
Okay.
You know, she was not at all political, but she was contemplative. And she did so much good, and now she's a saint and has a huge influence over all of society.
Okay. But can you see the relationship between the contemplative and the city right in our patron saint here in Mishawaka? That's a hint. See, Merton argues in his introduction to the thing on Gandhi, he argues that Western people have forgotten the communal dimension of contemplation. And he wants to, but he says if you look at the tradition, you look at a story like St. Babel, you're going to see it, that the contemplative has a role in the city. And when we get to Merton's story, which is the end of this session, the end, July 31st, I'm going to do Merton, God willing, if I'm here. But if I'm here, I'm going to do Merton. And on Merton, we're going to see how Merton interfaces with the politics of his time, even though he was a totally committed monk. And what he did to interface that way, and some of his struggles in that regard. Okay? So that's a good question for the rest of the thing, of the rest of the series. Think about John Paul II. He's another example, right? Where he mixes his profound contemplative relationship with God with a tremendously active life, right? And so his contemplation informs his action on the world. But it's a question for us too, and how were we to do it? And that's the bigger question in a certain way, I think, behind what you're saying.
And Scripture talks about the troubles in the world, a fallen world, but our lives should be needed.
Right.
And that's by our growth in holiness and trying to become, by the grace of God, saints ourselves, so that we can be that light.
The light to the world, right. That's exactly right. Okay. Boy.
Wow.
Are we, you got the vision for what we're going to do? Have your questions ready about these people, too. I mean, the questions move everything.
Was Martin Luther King a follower of Gandhi then?
Yes, he was. He was very consciously trying to publicly imitate Gandhi. You better believe it. And in fact, we have a session on him, too. On Monday, the Monday of that same week, I do Merton. The last week in July, I do Martin Luther King and Merton. And the week before, I do one on Monday of Dorothy Day.
Right.
So the last three are Dorothy Day,
Okay.
Martin Luther King, and Thomas Merton. Okay? You see how? Yeah. So we'll answer that again. We'll look at the relationship between Gandhi and King. And Dunn has some things to say about that too. So they all kind of start molding together here.
Get myself up.
Okay.
Stand up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very